Squirrels! So hello, and welcome to another Legends of Runeterra video. My name is Chris, and today we are talking about how on earth do we fix Bilgewater, because Bilgewater, I'm sure most people would agree, is the weakest region right now. It was pretty much solo hard carried by our boy Twisted Fate for a while. Eventually, Twisted Fate got the deserved nerfs that, some of us had been screaming for a long time for. And eventually it happened, and unfortunately that left Bilgewater in a bit of a sorry state, though. It's not to say that there are no good Bilgewater decks, or no even remotely competitive Bilgewater decks. I think Tahm Kench Shiraka is always going to be one of those decks that's on sort of the outskirts, not necessarily tier 1, but always, has a chance of being pretty decent, as long as none of the cards change. So, you have Tahm Kench. Deep is like, yeah, it's not awful. It's not good, but it's not awful. And, there's probably some other things like you could use Misfortune with, in kind of Aurelia Misfortune or Scouts, but obviously they are going to end up feeling inferior to Azir Aurelia. So it's not that, like, Bilgewater is, like, completely total trash. It's just that there isn't much reason to play it over other things. And that's kind of, a bit of a sorry state to find yourself in as a whole region. So what on earth do we do to try and fix Bilgewater, to try and buff it up, to improve Bilgewater? Well, I've seen, there have been a lot of suggestions already about, what people would do to try and fix Bilgewater. And this is the reason that I'm making this video, in essence, because essentially, I disagree with almost everyone's suggestions that I've seen, because almost all suggestions that I have seen have been to try and buff a couple cards. One is Make It Rain. Another is Pilfered Goods. I've seen some suggestions of Petty Officer. I've seen just generally buffing the NAB package in general, like, just Black Market Merchant, Pilfered Goods, all of those things. I've seen some calls to revert Yordle Grifter. Obviously, there's been some calls to revert Riptide Rex as well. One that I actually agree with, but I'm going to talk about why I think that those other suggestions outside of Riptide Rex are not good ideas. And I've kind of slightly alluded to this before, but let's start with Make It Rain. So a lot of people, well, if you don't know, Make It Rain used to cost 2 mana when it first came out. It was a 2 mana card, and obviously if you buff this card back to 2 mana, it would definitely improve the region as a whole. It is a very strong card at 2 mana. It obviously helps Misfortune because it's a champion spell as well. So there would be a lot of different things that came from Make It Rain. It synergizes well with Gangplank, of course, and the Plunder effect. It's a cheap spell for Fizz. It is a good card to have in general that synergizes pretty well with the region as a whole. The reason that they nerfed this card was because the Make It Rain at 2 mana is essentially one of those cards that, if in certain matchups, if they have Make It Rain, well, they've won. And, if they don't, then you've got a chance. And those cards aren't good for the game. And I'm sure, many of you have probably played in a game or two where, you're playing against a certain archetype and you think, if they have X card, they will win. And there isn't much I can do about it. And if they don't have X card, I've got a pretty decent chance. Those games aren't fun. Because essentially you're just playing, a game of solitaire with each other. Well, not even with each other. You're playing solitaire of, here's my game plan, and you're just sort of waiting for them to play solitaire of, did you find the card that's going to win you the game? Because essentially, if you're playing like an aggro deck, and you go for, a bunch of 1 health followers on turns 1 and 2 and develop, and they play Make It Rain on turn 2 and kill all your 3 units, you've put 3 cards on the board, they've played 1, you've actually spent 1 more mana than them to play those units. Yeah, that is game over a lot of the times, and that happened pretty often. And I think people, it's a long time ago now, so people probably have forgotten. It's probably almost a year ago at this point. People have probably forgotten that actually, yeah, that happened quite often in a lot of different sort of decks and scenarios, and it doesn't feel good at all. It feels really quite bad, and so should Make It Rain go back to 2 mana? If I was, in charge of this game, I definitely would not, because those kind of cards, and you can look through the history of this game and kind of find other examples. Grand Plaza is sort of the one that really sticks out to me, where, you would play against Grand Plaza decks back in the day, and it would literally be, they play Grand Plaza on 3, yeah, they've probably won. If they don't, they they probably are less than 50%. That was a lot of Grand Plaza decks back in the day, and that's just not good for the game. And I feel like Make It Rain was probably a slightly lesser version of that, but still had the same effect, where in certain games it would just win you the game straight up, and any 2-mana card should not really just win you a game, that early on. There should be more of a game to that, and I'm sure most of you probably agree. So I'm obviously against buffing Make It Rain. Then we come to cards like Pilfered Goods, and this one is a bit different. I don't think Pilfered Goods / Black Market Merchant / any of the NAB package ever really guaranteed won a game on its own, but NAB as a whole is not fun to play against. It's kind of funny when you have, when you're playing it and you have double Black Market Merchant into triple Pilfered Goods. That is funny for you, and it is funny to just draw 8 of your opponent's cards and have them all discounted. And obviously that was very strong, particularly when Pilfered Goods used to cost 2 mana, which is what people are saying, oh, bring it back to 2 mana because it used to cost 2 mana. But again, playing against NAB isn't fun. It really, really isn't fun, particularly with Black Market Merchant on the board. It just gives too much value. You see this as a potential 2 mana draw 2. In Runeterra, I feel more so than perhaps other card games, people are going to play good cards. But most of the time, you're going to draw a good card. I understand that it might not necessarily always be the most useful card, depending on what strategy you're going for. If you're playing an aggro deck and you're playing against control, Pilfered Goods kind of ends up being a somewhat useless card. But in a lot of matchups, that was not the case, and it always could find a deck, like an Ezreal deck, for instance. An Ezreal Bilgewater deck loves Pilfered Goods because either you're going to find a unit that's going to help you survive, or you're going to find a spell that targets something, or draws cards, or whatever. You're probably going to find something that's pretty useful. And at 2 mana, a 2 mana draw 2 that's going to find something useful that can get discounted cards as well, so they're even better. Or if it's just discard fodder, it's not great. It really isn't that great, and it's not fun to play against. So I don't know why people have this thing for let's buff things that we know aren't fun to play against. It's like buffing elusives. No one enjoys playing against elusives. You don't want an elusive dominant meta. We've seen what that looks like with TF Fizz. When they go big on you with elusives, yeah, guess what? It's not fun. And NAB, I think, is kind of the same thing. Why are we buffing these things? It would be like if TLC got nerfed and then in 6 months' time, everyone's like, oh, let's buff that back. Let's bring that back. It's if you say that now, you'd go no, don't bring that back. That was awful to play against. It didn't feel good at all. But I feel like people get this sort of longing for this nostalgic past and going, oh, let's bring this thing back. Let's not. So Pilfered Goods, another one. Don't change. The NAB package, we don't need to do that. Petty Officer is another one where I think if you bring this up to 2 health, which it did get, and then it got brought down back to 1, it's kind of like Merciless Hunter again, where it's yeah, you end up with a really strong card. It's good for the region. Maybe just it's too good, it just gives you too much flexibility. It just gets slammed into every single deck. And it's again, just one of those things that I think could be avoided. With that said, I've gone through a bunch of cards there that I don't think should be buffed. So how on earth do we fix Bilgewater? Well, I think it's time for people to open their minds and think about, other things that could be good within Bilgewater. And could be just good for, not just one particular champion or archetype, but for, sort of the whole region. You can pick other cards that would be useful for the entire region still. And I think the way I would go down, and sort of the route that I would take, is going after kegs and looking at some of the keg things that you could do and thinking, because kegs synergize pretty well with, quite a few of the champions, obviously Gangplank, Misfortune, Twisted Fate, maybe Fizz if they're spells as well, which, some of them are. And maybe the new champion as well that we're about to get, who knows. But kegs, cards like More Powder, isn't a good card, but it could be a good card. You could change this to fast speed, you could change, its mana cost, you could change it. A lot of different things about this card, how many kegs it summons, and you could make this a strong card if you wanted to. And as I mentioned, it would have impacts for quite a few of the different champions and would allow you to maybe go into kegs more, which have quite a bit of synergy with different things. Boom Ship, I think, is a card that you could make this the new Make It Rain. You know, you could make this fast speed for a start and create this sort of keg deck, which we haven't really seen that much of. We've seen like it in flashes, but never a sort of full in, like, I'm playing a bunch of kegs with these big effects. And you can buff other spells, like Parlay, I think is... Could this card be fast speed? Yes. Would it be strong? Yes. Would it be, like, overbearing in any instance, like Make It Rain is? No. This would be a great target to change to fast speed. It'd be a really good card at that point, don't get me wrong. But if you want to make the region as a whole better, it's a good card that has, you know, some great synergies with, you know, particularly Gangplank, but also, you know, Fizz and other things like that. Two champions which, you know, I don't think most people would mind seeing in certain, you know, higher echelons again. And would it be completely, you know, busted that you complain about this card every time? I don't think so. That's why I think Parlay would be like the kind of card that you are looking at and thinking that could be a good change. Another one is, where is it? What's it actually called? Double Up. This is another card where it's like, if you make kegs better and you made this card better as well, like, imagine what you could do. You know what I mean? Like, imagine what you could do. You play Double Up. They buff Dreadway, so maybe they are sort of hinting that they do want to go that way. But I think there's so many different things to be done here that kind of create this whole sort of idea of, you know, a keg deck coming to life and it dealing damage to the enemy nexus. I don't know how you would change this card. Obviously, you can just increase the numbers if you wanted to. You could swap the 4 and 2, to be honest. You know, you could do a lot of different things with this card in general. But I think it would be a very interesting card to try and change. And again, just add to the card pool. Another sort of idea, if you wanted to sort of make other generically good cards that have not maybe shined as much in the past, I think you could look at the vulnerable package within Bilgewater. Because Hired Gun has been a card that has seen play, but the other vulnerable cards, if I can remember where exactly they are, here, Razor Scale Hunter, for instance, and the Sheriff Laureate Rose, you can make these cards better. You know, you could decrease the mana by 1. You know, Invulnerable has more synergies now with, like, Renekton. It would be a good way to get Shurima Bilgewater playing in a new way. You know, you could go Undying with it. You could just go straight Misfortune with it if you wanted to. You know, there'd be a lot of new things that you could do that we perhaps haven't seen before. And I think, again, these are the kinds of things. These are the kind of archetypes that haven't shined before that I think deserve potentially a chance to, you know, come into the meta and be a really good card. We saw it with a card like Crackshot Corsair. This card never saw play when it was a 1-1, but as a 1-2, it's found its way into decks. People play it every so often, and it's a card that sees play. But it seems like people are wanting to just simply, you know, revert changes of before and not create anything fresh, just sort of relive the past. Which I don't think is the best way to go about these things. And so, in my opinion, what they should do is try and buff new cards that haven't really ever seen play before, like some of the ones that I just mentioned, and see, okay, you know, there's a full, like, keg deck now. There's a Shadow Isles, Gangplank, I don't know, maybe Thresh or whatever the other champion would be. There's a Gangplank Shadow Isles deck with a bunch of kegs that uses stuff like Parlay and Withering Whale and Boom Ship and all of those things, and it's really quite good. That would be different. That would be new. It would be exciting. It would be like, ooh, haven't seen anything like this in a little while, and I think that that's the kind of thing that we should be looking for, and that is pretty much all I wanted to say. So, with that said, thank you so much for watching. I will be back tomorrow with another Legends of Runeterra video. Not exactly sure what I'm going to do it on, but let me know if you want to see me talk about anything design-wise within this game. Leave a comment down below and let me know, and I will see you tomorrow then. So thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.